Okay, Zok to Helen Gemara. Hahi Matanto. Now the Kosovay, somebody wrote a star matana of a Shchivmara, and he wrote a very interesting term. He wrote B'chaim Uvamavas. So what does it mean? Rav Omar Harehi Kematna Shchivmara. It has the status of Matna Shchivmara. Ushmul Omar Harehi Kematna Bari. It has the status of the Matna Bari. The difference is, should the fellow who gave it want to be chayzer, could he be chayzer? If it's a Matna Shchivmara, he could be chayzer. If it's a Matna Bari, he cannot be chayzer. Rav Omar Harehi Kematna Shchivmara Midichsiv B'Movas. He said B'Movas. So obviously what he means to say is Achamiza Kamar. B'Hai Dichsiv B'Chaim. So why did he say B'Chaim? It's Simin Ba'Oma the Chaya. He said L'Chaim. He wanted to live. Shmuel Amar Harei Kamatnas Bari. It's about this Bari. Midichsiv B'Chaim. Mechaim Kamar. I B'Hai the Kasav V'Movas. It's command Amar Me'atav Adoilam. Like till death do us part. It's a forever gift. Okay, let's see the Rashbam. Zok to Rashbam. Haim Betata was a Matna Shchivmara B'Miktsas. Because if it's everything, then he would get it back. Shekosav Akin. The koina l'divra koil, everybody holds he's koina bein amad bein lo amad, whether or not the fellow survives. To have a ksiv b'chayu v'mois. So he said matanazu ani maknaloch b'chayu v'mois. Zok to Rashbam v'lekalo ukma b'matnas bari. You can't say it's speaking by a regular healthy person, because the heichi lema Rav harei kamat neshchivera lemikni lachamisa. Rav could not have possibly said. So therefore, it must be that he's a shchivmara that said this. So Rav Omar Arei came out the shchivmara lemikni lachamisa, and therefore vim amad chayzer. The kol shekei nemat the shchivmara b'chol shu b'loy shir the loykani ela ad lachamisa. And surely, if it's a shchivmara where there was no shir, he's not koine until lachamisa. Here we're talking about even if there was a shir. Simna l'chaim. Why did he say b'chaim? Not because he wanted to be chal b'chaim, rather, Koloimar, b'movas davku. He wanted to be davka about the shchivmara, and it should only be chal after he dies. U'mechaim lav davka, ela l'simin toiv, which his could be sosai. Since he mentioned his death, he wanted to balance that out with alachaim. So like Russell leftoich piv l'satan, Koloimar hamokim yatzilenu michayli zeh v'loyamus. That's what Rav Shita is. And Shmuel says, "Arei kamat this bari." Kilu like siv baba mavas. It's as if it didn't say mavas. Vafilu imamad einay chayzer. Vafilu b'matana beloy shir. He still can't be chayzer. The hacha loy lema Shmuel lo yadana me'idba. This is not a case like we learned yesterday, where there is both a kinyan dan as well as a matna shchivmara, where Shmuel said that it doesn't work at all. The name ain't shtar lachamisa. The kasav b'machayim. Here he said the fair. She wants it to be chal machayim, so he's clearly saying. He wants it to be a matnas bari. Mechaim kona the mashva dafka mayata his chilik. Okay, so Zok to Gemara. Amar Nahardoi. So the Nahardoi said, no, Shmuel was the Rav in Nahardoi. They said, Hilchasa kavasei the Rav. Even in Nahardoi, they pass like Rav, even though normally you pass like Shmuel and Dinei Mominus. Here they passed like Rav that it had a halacha of a matna shchivmara. Amar Rava, the ksiv ba mechaim, so not bichaim but mechaim. Then Kana Rava wants to claim that even Rav would be moida that it's considered a matnas bari. But Amar Memar las hilchasa kavasei de Rav. We surely don't pass like Rav. So therefore, Rav holds that bichaim and mechaim are all still considered a matnas shchivmara, and Shmuel holds any nusach is considered a matnas bari, and we pass like that. Amalei Rav Ashi la Meimer. Rav Ashi told the Meimer, Shita, the Amri Nahardoi Hilchasa Kavasei de Rav. Of course, what Rava is saying is wrong, because the Nahardoi said that we pass like Rav, and they're not making a distinction between bichaim and mechaim. Zakt Gemara Mao the Tema. I would have thought. So why did that Meimer have to tell me l'silchasa kavasei de Rava? So Zok to Gemara Mao the Tema mechaim moidi Rav. Maybe Rav is moidi mechaim, like Rava said. Kamash malala Meimar that less hilchasa kavasei de Rava. Rather, he passed like Rav, and no matter whether he used the lotion of mechaim or Bichaim, it's considered a matna shchibra. Someone came to ask a shaila by Rav Nachman in Ardon. The problem was we wanted to paskin like Rav, but in the Hardor, in Shmuel's turf, to paskin against him, Rav Nachman didn't feel comfortable. So Shadri l'kamedir Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba l'Shum Tamya. He sent him to a city called Shum Tamya, which is where Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba held court. Held court, and he told him to ask him the shaila there. Omar, he said, Rav Nachman said, Hocha Asr de Shmuel. We're here in the Hardah in Shmuel's fiefdom. Heichi Navid Kavasei de Rav. How can we pass like Rav? That's why he sent him to Rabbi Yirmiyah, who was in Rav's territory, and that's where he would receive a psak like Rav. Hahida soy lekamei de Rav. There was once a woman who came to Rav, and the woman did this. She wrote Mechayim. She wrote Mechayim, and now she wants to be Chayzer, but the recipient said, no, you said Mechayim, and therefore it's a matnas bari, and I get to keep it. Ovid lo Rava Kishmaitse, and Rava Paskin that Mechayim is going to be a good matana, it's matana's bari, and she can't back out. So she was very unhappy that Rava is not letting her back out from this gift. Have a katar delay. She was menacing him and bugging him because she was pestering him to say that it should be a matna shchivmera so that she should be able to be chayzer on the gift. So what happened? So Rava told Rav Papa B'Rei Rav Chanan, who was his soiper, who was his court recorder, and he told him, do the following: to get her off my back, we're going to fool. Zilk soivla, write the psak that she wants, that is matna shchivmera, but at the end, write something that will be clear to any dying that sees this star that I didn't mean it. So the chosav ba soicher alein umaton. This phrase is used when somebody makes a deal and hires employees and they don't show up. If he doesn't get it done, or if people walked away in the middle of the day, and he's in the middle of a job and it's going to get ruined if he can't complete the job, he could do one of two things. Either he could hire other workers to finish the day and finish the work and take it out of the wages that he would have paid them for working half a day, or he could promise them that he'll pay them anything, and then at the end of the day he says, sorry, I'm fooling you. So that phrase would have been a symbol to anyone who she would take this psak bezdin to enforce. They would realize that it was a scam. But this lady was no pushover. She was a tough cookie. So she said, Amra, Litva Arbe, your ship should sink. Atuya kimatisli. Are you trying to fool me? So she cursed him that he should have a ship full of merchandise and it should sink and he should lose everything. So the Allah, so Atuya kimatisli, are you trying to fool me? So what happened is at the end of the day, Rava was afraid that her curse, even if it's a killless hedged, but Rava was afraid that her curse would have an impact. So he tried to do something that would be yoytze the curse, so to speak. So Amshinu Lemane, the Rava B'Maya. Rava soaked his clothing and his kalim in water, so it should be as if the curse was Mekuyim on something simple like that. He still ended up losing a ship. So the Rashbam says that he realized. Let's have a look at the Rashbam inside. The Rashbam says, "Shorm b'mayim l'skayim kilosa b'kach l'yizbek moincho da'altihi kilas hedjit kala b'einecha." You have to take when someone curses you, you got to take it seriously. Mahashmayinon the bein b'chaim bein michaim is simona l'chaim. So yeah, you have to be careful because even someone who doesn't curse you, there's a famous question they always ask. When a shulach goes around and you give him $1 and he gives you bracha v'atzlacha, doesn't mean much to you. But what happens if you don't give him? And he says, you low life, just start, do this and this. You get shooken up. Why do you get shooken up then and not when the guy gives you bracha? To tell you just because then you know he means it. So that's it. Rava knew she meant it.
I agree with that. But I know that a bunch of rules said that he was also
You have to speak up, the other wants to hear you.
Moshe Blumenfeld was once at the council, and his wife, and Brian wrote to him, and points out room, he says, that woman over there, she just said to me, actually, I'm on for my needs.
So I don't got a problem with Moshe, you got a problem.
No. So Moshe worked, and Moshe ran away and gave her money. She wouldn't be crazy. He goes, it's on my back today.
What happens if Loi Kosav ba Shchivmara? So he wanted to give about the Shchivmara, but he didn't write in it a note that would indicate that it's a Shchivmara. And the Rishbam tells us precisely what that is. Loi Kosav ba Shchivmara, in the start it says Reuben is giving this to Shimon. It says there Kidakatzir v'Rami Baris, when he was cut down and he was sick and lying in bed. So it says in the star that this matana was given when the person was a Shchivmara. But the gam loshen matnas borila nichtav ba, the star doesn't have any indication that it was written by a bari either, and that nusach would be kad mahalach al ragloi b'shuka. This person gave the gift when he was walking on his feet. In other words, he was on his own 2 feet. He was healthy. So now we have a star, and we don't know if it represents a matnas shchivmara or if it represents a matnas bari. Shazal loshen matnas bari kidamin begamara uvematana beloy shir mari. We're talking about a matana where nothing was left over, means he gave everything. The Amr and Bay, the matana, Shem Amad Chayzer. So, therefore, if it's a matnas bari, it doesn't work. And if it's a matnas shchivmara, it will work. So let's see what happens. The Gemara gets into that. It's a good point that you're bringing up. So, who Omer shchivmara hayisi? He says, I was a shchivmara. The Hainam bari hayisa. So it's the opposite. So let's see what the Rashbam says. Who I'm Shchivmara easy? B'chashreinibi. Now I'm b'chayzer. B'chashreinibi. And the recipient said, Bario Yisa, v'loy sachser, and you cannot be chayzer. Okay. So I'm not sure what the Rashbam says earlier, because if it's a matana, how does it work unless it's working with what we said from Rav and Shmuel, that if you write both, it's work, but it doesn't say that. Because look what it says. It says matana beloy shir mari. It's speaking about a matana without a shir. Damrin vei, the ena matana, it wouldn't be a matnas bari, shem amad chayzer. But then when the Rashbam elaborates on the case where who I'm a shchivmara, you see, v'chazreini boy, v'chazreini bi. So the giver wants to say I was a shchivmara, and therefore he was chayzer. They claim Baria Yisa, Veloy Sachser, and you cannot be Chayzer. I'm not sure if a Matlas Bari works. If a Matlas Bari works, if he gave everything away. Does a Matlas Bari work? Did we say a Matlas Bari does not work if he gave everything away? Or even if he gave everything away as a Matlas Bari, it still wouldn't work unless a Matlas Bari still didn't work. Even if he made a kidney, it wouldn't work. Did we not? Because this is still in the non-Sahadi. Yeah, we had from Shmuel that even if he gave away a matnas bari with the kinyan, that would have worked. That's right.
Yeah,
that's right. I'm sorry. Yeah, no. Even if he made a kinyan. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure how this works out. Let's see the Gemara. So and anyway, the Hainam Bari says so it's a legitimate gift. You can't back out. So the halach is Sarach Lahavi Raya Shchivmara Haya Dever Meir. The onus of proof is on the giver to say that he was a shchivmara. So we're going to have to see who's the muchzak over here. The Chachamim say, what are you talking about? We know these nechasim belong to Reuben first. In order for Shimon to be able to claim that they belong to him, he has to prove that it was a matnas bari. Okay, let's see the Rashbam. He has to prove that at that point, when he wrote the star, he was a shchivmara. The chosman shelo yavi raya zacha hamakabel matana. The Reb Meir, the Gemara mafarish raya b'mai v'taimimai. The Gemara is going to explain why the onus is on the giver to prove that he was a shchivmara, and what type of raya could he possibly bring. The Chachamim betray gavni mishfru tamayir, but the Gemara is going to have two different ways to explain the Chachamim. Hamoyche mechabel raya, the hainin mekabel matana, and the noisen is the muchzak binachas. Okay, so let's see the Gemara. Hahu matanta, now because of Bay, it said in it, Kad have a katzir v'rami ba'arsa. it said very clearly that he's giving this gift when he was sick, but so the person would write in the star, if he was giving a matna shchivra, kat have a kotz of Rabbi Barsi. But then afterwards, I think Bezdin would write on the star, umigav karai iftul salome, and he actually died from this sickness, because we learned, and I think you asked me yesterday, what if he dies from a different sickness? I think you brought that up yesterday. Who brought up yesterday? What if he dies from a different sickness? Chayafir brought up. So the Gemara discusses that today. So it's not, in order to be able to collect with this star, you need that the star should also have said it. So maybe Adam or somebody must have written in it that yes, it was a matna shchivra, and the person actually died from this sickness. Let's see the Rashbam. Migav kari ifter kacho you regilin lichtoiv matna shchivra hanechtavis lachem misasim. A matna shchivra that was written after misa. So that means it wasn't written by the giver. It was obviously something that was validated by Adam or was validated by Bezdin. L'idea, to make sure it's clear, Shanachosim alolu nusunim l'zeh makabel bitzava shchivra and the mitoich oisi choyli niftar. So Amud Ben Tayim, he didn't get up and become healthy in between v'loy chazar boy. So Tosha speaks about if someone becomes healthy, does he have to officially be chayzer, or is it an automatic chazar? Do we assume he was chayzer? So there's a discussion about that. So Zak the Gemara, Omar Rabba, and I think we need the Bach over here. Omar Rabba, Hare Meis, Hare Kivrei Ma'chiachala. So Rabba says we don't need to be concerned because Lamaisa right now he's dead. So we can assume that there's a chazaka de hashta. Since he's dead now, he probably died from the illness that he was referring to when he wrote to Matna Shchim. So Amar Rabbi Harei write Shumes, Uvasar Hashtas Linan, you go both through the chazaka of now, the Hamadnuhu al Cheskas, Misosai. We put him on the chazaka of now. Well, you wonder what if it was 10 years later? I guess maybe there would be, but I'm not sure exactly how that would work, but that's a good point. It makes sense to say that he died after this sickness, and therefore v'kana hamakabel mat. So that's what Rabbi said. Amalei Abaye, I don't understand. Hashta umasvina sharubin la'avet. Most ships sink. Nevertheless, noistin aleim chumer chaim v'chumer mesim. If a woman's husband is on a ship, and we don't know if he survived or not, so this woman is an aguna, we are machmer to treat her like a neshash, and we're machmer to treat her like an almana. What would be the nafkamina? L'chomer either way. The nafkamina would be if she was a bas Yisrael who married a kohen. So as long as she's married to the kohen, she can eat truma. If her husband goes missing on a ship, she can no longer eat truma because we have to assume that her husband died. But on the flip side, if she was a bas kohen married to a Yisrael who didn't have children, normally while she's married she can't eat truma, but once her husband dies, she could eat truma. Here, she's not allowed to eat truma because we have to assume that her husband's still alive. So nois nolei chomer chaim v'chomer mesim. People who are sick, sheroiv choylin l'chaim, most choylin survive like Hoshkin. Surely we should be choishish that maybe he didn't die from that sickness, and therefore, how could you assume that he died from that sickness? Let's see the response. Man le malach de me'ahu choyli iftur leveisei lamet. Who said, even if the person did die, because we know he's dead, who said he died from that sickness, and therefore who said that matna shchivra is valid? Most sick people end up recovering. Maybe then the chazer boy was chazer, and then the achach chalumes. Maybe he died. He became sick a second time and died. So therefore, how do you know that this matna shchivra would be valid? Hashtu mas vinois hatoyvois payam madach ships that sink. Most of them go bad. I might be wrong. I don't think it means that most ships sink. Most ships that sink, everybody dies, right? Yes. So we know his ship sunk. We don't know if he died or not. I think that's what I figured was about to say. Thank you. we're still choshid that maybe he's still alive. Kidetnam beper kolaget. Avalir shekiv shekarchum usvinish of the bayom, which we know the chances are that the person is not alive. Noisna love chumrei chaim v'chumrei mesim. And the Rashbam says, Bas koin Yisrael, Bas Yisrael koin, shteyem ein oichlois betru. So choylem, sheroiv choylem l'chaim. He did not be learned, ha-maybe get me within this hayam, v'hinichai zakein oichlois. What happens if there was an old or sick person who sent a get to his wife, and the shluchim are bringing the get from far away? So by the time they're delivering the get to her, we don't even know if her husband's alive. So maybe she's migureshes, or maybe she's zakok evil. So just looking at the Rishbam, nois in law becheskas shukayim, they could still give her the get under the assumption that her husband's still alive, and it will be a good get, even though he was old and sick when he sent it. Loy kol shekain the lema im amat chazaboy. So kol shekain you should be chodesh. Madach in the case where we assume he died. We're still choshed that he's alive. In a case where it's likely that he survived, the haraya, we even consider an old and sick person alive, so that his get can be delivered. So koshkin over here, we should be choshed that he survived from that chayli, and therefore it shouldn't be a good matnash chibna. Umiu Rabba lehadrabe. Even though Rabba was asked this kasha by Abaye, Rabba did not back down. He still maintains that since he's dead now, we say that the muhsik is the mekabel matan. And the kaimel on kavasei, we actually pass him like Rabba, because in a moment we will see, this might say, Kerab Nosan Osla, the kaimel on kavasei. We're shortly going to quote a Tana Rab Nosan, who holds like Rava, who clearly Rava is aligned with, who we pass like him. Kedamin beGemara, Ba'alma, Rab Nosan, Dayanahi, Rab Nosan was a dayan, the Nachas Lom Kedadina. He always got down to the bottom of it. So therefore, since his psak supports Rabbah, we pass like Rabbah. So let's see the Gemara. Amar Rav Huna Barej Rabbi Shua. Kaman Nazla Hoshmaitza the Rabbah. Who is Rabbah consistent with? Rab Nosan, he's consistent with the Tanya Rab Nosan. The Tanya we learned. Mi moitzi miyad mi. Who is the moitzi over here? Zokter Ashba. Mi moitzi miyad mi. Matana shein kosova loy loshen matnas bori. Now we're going back to our Mishnah, right? Till now, we were talking about a case where it was a Lashon Matnas Chivmara, but we don't know if the person died from this chayli. But now we're going back to our Mishnah. Our Mishnah, or the case of our Mishnah, where it did not say in the star if it was a Matnas Bari or if it was a Matnas Chivmara, Kimas Nisin, as the response speaks out. Ze Omer Bari HaYisa, and therefore you cannot back out. And therefore I could back out. So mi moitzi miyadni, who is the hamoitzi mechaver olavaraya? So Kumar, who moitzi miyidayen? We consider the giver the moitzi. So I'm sorry, who moitzi miyidayen? No, I'm sorry, the opposite. Who moitzi miyidayen below raya? He could be moitzi from their hands without a raya, meaning he's the muhsik. They have to prove that it was a valid gift. The hein ein moitzin miyadai el baraya divi Rabbi Yaakov. Rabbi Yaakov holds the noisin matana is the muhsik. But Rav Nosan Omer in barihu, if he's healthy, Allah lahavi raya show yeshchiv mera. Then he would have to prove that he was a shchiv mera when he gave the get. So if right now in Bezdin he's healthy and strong, and he's claiming that he was a shchiv mera at the time that he gave the get and he recovered, that he gave the gift and he recovered, and therefore the gift is not valid, he has to prove it. And if shchiv merahu, if when they go to the Torah, the person is a shchiv mera, then alayhen lahavi raya shabari haya. Then they will have to bring a raya that he was a bari. So you see clearly that Reb Nosan holds you go basha the chazak of now, and therefore in the case that the Rabbi discussed, you also go basha the chazak of now, and therefore since he's dead now, we can assume it was a matnashkim, and he died from that original sickness. So let's see Rashbam. Who might be the B'noisein oimed b'nechasav v'zoichabehem. The giver, according to the first sheet, according to Yaakov, he's the muhsik, and he keeps everything. The hamid nechasav malchus kasan. let's assume that the property remains in the same ownership as it was until now. Therefore, v'yad bal hashtar shabolat tfoyin nechasav shozeh al hatachtoin. And the bal hashtar who wants to make a claim on these nechasim, claiming that he received them as a gift, he has to prove that it was in fact a matnas bori. The loyas lina basar hashta. You don't go basar the chazaka the hashta. The hedja, kid Abaye, like Abaye says, the roiv. I'm looking at the Vav. I'm sorry, I'm looking at the wrong shikol. Uchida Abaye, like Abaye said, the roiv chaylim l'chaim. Most chaylim are healthy. The equal member the other way. Therefore, we could say that he was a shchivra, but he got better and he was chaylim. The heim ein maitzin miyadoi elam came evin rai be'edim shabari. But Rav Nosson said the opposite. In barihu b'shas hamad b'din. If the giver is a bari b'shas hamad b'din, then all of the havi raya, he would have to bring a raya that he was in fact a shchivra when he gave the gift. Why does lin basar hashta? We look at him now; he's strong and healthy. We assume that's what he was all the time. Okay, about it. Now we have another interesting twist. Amar Rabbi Elazar, ulatuma k'machloikis. The same machloikis that we have with Rabbi Nosson and Rabbi Yaakov will also be le'inyan tumah. Let's stop and see what the Rishbam says. Amar Rabbi Elazar le'inyan tumah. The kaim along, we know there's a rule that safek tumah reshus hayachid tzvekei tumah. We learn from Saita that if a safek tumah occurs in a reshus hayachid, the Torah tells us to paskin that it's vaday tumah. U'b'reshus harabim, but if the same thing occurred in reshus harabim, tzvekei Torah. So just an example, a sheretz. We don't know if a sheretz touched this bread or not, and we don't know if it's tummy. If this occurred, if there's a sheretz in the room and there's a bread in the room, and we don't know if the sheretz actually touched the bread. So if this suffix occurred in the reshus hayachid, we treat the bread as if it's tummy. But if this suffix occurred in the reshus harabim, we treat the bread as if it's tahar. Now, the definition of, we'll soon see in a minute, the definition of reshus harabim legabe suffix tumah is not the same as the definition of reshus harabim legabe carrying on Shabbos. We're going to see that they have different parameters. The kaim along, and we know nami as well. A bika is where people plant things. So b'moisach hama, where you've already harvested all that grew and it's not being planted, we consider it reshus harabim l'tumah because people don't mind if anybody stomps through their fields in the Yemosach Chama when they're not being planted. So it's considered reshus harabim. But it'll be Yemosach Shomim. But during the winter time, that's when people have their crops growing. They don't want people walking on their field because they don't want people trampling their crops. So therefore, it's a reshus hayachid l'tumah kidetnan. So therefore, k'machloikis yeheichad nechleku Rabbi Yaakov Rabbi Nosson b'matana stam. The same way Rabbi Yaakov and Rabbi Nosson argue about a matana yazlin basar hashta oy basar cheskas nechasim. Do you give precedence to the chazaka the hashta, or do you give precedence to the muchzik? Hachanami afligu gabe tumah. Their machloikis will actually manifest itself when you're discussing a case of tumah. What would be the case? Shimba adam lebezdin. If someone came to bezdin, v'nishal, and he asked the shaila about the following case, al shenichnas lebika, he tells the dayanim, I walked into this bika. Ve'ein yodeya masay nichnas. I don't remember when I went into the bika. I don't know when it was. I know I was in this bika where there's a safek tumah buried there, and I don't know when it was. I don't remember. If it might have been in the summer, and then it would be considered a safek tumah b'shus harabim. Or maybe it was in the Yemosach Shamim where I encountered the safek tumah, and therefore I should be tumah. So how do you pass in the shaila? Chazina im ata kishanisha. What is the season when he came to Bezdin? If now in Bezdin kishanishal Yemosach Chama tahar. If when he came to ask the shaila, it was the summer where the property would be considered a reshus harabim, Bezdin will pass that he's tahar. Because according to Rabbi Nosson, we say the chazaka the hash is right now it's summer. We'll assume that when he encountered this shaila, it was the summer as well. And if he came to ask the shaila in the winter, then Bezdin paskin tamei the basar hash does linon. Again, we assume if you're asking the shaila now, this is probably where in the season that this suffix occurred. Rabbi Yaakov, those who was a chazaka, Rabbi Yaakov will go to the original chazaka. So therefore, Hamei Tar al Chaskasai. He always has a Cheskas Taira because before he encountered this suffix Tumah, he was Vadei Tar. So therefore, Hamei Tar al Chaskasai, the Torah no be Tahar, at Shiavoyu Edim, V'yo'idu, Shivamoisak Shamim Nichtas. Unless we know for sure it's B'moisak Shamim, he goes Basra is Chazaka Da'ashta. So you see clearly this same achloikas that they have, Lagabi Amatas Shigmar versus Amatas Bori, whether you follow the Muhsin or whether you follow the Chazaka Da'ashta, will also manifest itself in the case of Suffolk Tumah in a Bika. It's non be learned. Bika. The Yosy Chama, it's considered Rishus HaYochid LeShabbos. It's a Rishus HaYochid LeShabbos, even in the Yosy Chama, because the definition of Rishus Rabbim for Shabbos has to be a certain width and a certain amount of people, right? But a Rishus Rabbim L'Tumah, but it's considered a Rishus Rabbim L'Tumah because it's not a private area. B'Yosy Shomim, it's a Rishus HaYochid L'Kan U'L'Kan. It's Sayah Rishus HaYochid L'Inyan Shabbos, like it always was, but it's also a Rishus HaYochid L'Inyan Tumah. Let's see the Rashbam. It's non-bika, Mesuyeges B'Geder. So it did have a little gate around it. Rishus HaYochid Hi Shabbos. It would be considered a Rishus HaYochid Shabbos if it had a gate around it. Va'afilu Hi Karfif Yoyser Mebeis Hasayim, even if it's a Karfif, which is a place where people don't live. What does the Zion say? L'zoyek l'soichai mershus harabim chayiv u'letaltal oser. So it has the chumrah of a reshus hayachid. If you threw something from a reshus hayachid, from a reshus harabim into it, it will be considered a reshus hayachid. But it's also to carry it. Okay, so it's a reshus harabim l'tumah. But even though it's a reshus hayachid, Lagabe Hilchos Shabbos, it's a Rishus Rabbim L'Tumah, to lav makam stiri. It's not a hidden place. And those are the parameters with which we decide if it's a Rishus Rabbim or Rishus Yochid L'Inyan Tumah. I will Mosek Shomim, Yeshem Zroyim, where things are growing, Ein Nichnas L'Seicha. People don't go inside it. Therefore, by the makam stiri, it's considered a hidden place, the suffix Tumah Tameh. If I'm not mistaken, one of the biggest coolest that the Toronto Erev relies on is this problem of karfif. A karfif that's Yosy Mebeis Hasayim, so it's more than 50 by 100, that's not Osri L'Dira. I mean, if it's your front yard and you happen to have a very big front yard, that's also L'Dira, you live there. But what about a park? What about a cemetery? That's considered a karfif, Yosy Mebeis Hasayim, She'ein Mukav L'Dira. But I have to take a step back. Reb Shlomo held that parks wouldn't be a problem. And we have parkettes everywhere that are connected to our Erev that should mess up the Erev, because if an Erev, which is we're trying to make into Rishus HaYochid, is mefulish, it's open to a Rishus HaRabbim, it has a Rishus HaRabbim you can't carry there. So the Shaila is all of these parkettes that we have all over Toronto. Why isn't that a carpet in the Shlomo? So Shlomo said that since, don't quote me, I heard that Shlomo said, I didn't hear it from his mouth himself, that since it's normal for you to pack lunch when you go to the park, so that might be considered a carpet for Oslo Deer. Because if people eat there, that would be considered Oslo Deer. A cemetery where no one hangs out, right, that's a different story. And that's where the problem is.
People walk through it. People didn't hang out and they walk through it.
Yeah, but so
It's not that you just for cemetery.
but I don't know if people will. I don't know if there's picnic tables there. Right. So that I think that's one of the
benches. We put the cemetery bench 2 weeks ago.
So that's one of the shilas about the cemeteries, and sometimes they weren't able to put a gate around. Like we're more foolish to the 4-1, but there's a gate, right? By all the entrances to the 4-1, there's a gate. And I think they even close it once a year for a couple of minutes. But there's certain cemeteries that they weren't able to do that. So I believe that's one of the coolest that's relied upon over there. Okay, let's see the Gemara weiter. Amar Rava. Where's the Chaf? I got it. I'm not sure if it's not focusing so good anymore, if something happened to my eyes. Amar Rava. Lo shanu ella shaloi avru alav yimoisak sham. So I got to get the Yosy right over here because it's critical. It's base. Amar Rava lo shanu lo gersinen v'amar Rava ella amar Rava. Okay, it's no vav. It's Amar Rava Lo Shanu Ella Shaloi Avru Aleha Yemoisak Sham. Aval Avru Aleha Yemoisak Shamim Rishus Hayachid Lakanu Lakan. Then it'll be a Rishus Hayachid for both. So what does this mean? This means it depends on what occurred. So Amar Rava Lo Shanu Milsa Bapanafshi. Rava is saying a whole new halacha, and that's why the Bach says there's no Amar Rava. It's a completely new halacha. Mafarish the Milse. The Rabbi Lazar, the Ravakai, and if you're going to say that Rabbi Lazar's has anything to do with what Rava said, would be making a mistake. And what Rabbi Lazar just said was that Kemachloikis, the Machloikis of Rabbi Yaakov and Rabbi Nosson, is the same Machloikis would be Lagabe Tuma. So this has nothing to do with Rabbi Salah. Rabbi Salah is independent of that. The Rabbi Basra, Rabbi came after Rabbi Lazar. We don't have to make Rabbi Lazar consistent with Rabbi. So we don't say that a bika is considered a Rishus Rabbim. That's only, it's only considered a Rishus Hayachid. It's only considered a Rishus Rabbim if, since they put a gate around this field, if there was never a Yemaisak Sham. That's when we say it's considered a Rishus Harab. But once a winter season passed, where it was planted and it was gated, so it's only before you gate it, before you gate this property, that's when it will have the status of Rosh Hashanah in the summer where no one's planting. But once you gate it, and there's a winter season where it was actually a Rosh Hashanah, it retains that status forever. Sai legabe tuma and sai legabe Shabbos. Usvarim al Yosy, either it's a svar that he's saying, oy chumr derabanu, or maybe it's a chumr derabanu. The Rach Pirish, the Rach learns the Rav Apologad Rabbi Lazar. He's arguing Rabbi Lazar because Rabbi Lazar said it depends on when he came, right? V'hachi kasav v'Rav Chaylek al Rabbi Lazar uPirish nami lo shanu de bika el bizman shalei avru al zu hatuma shoysa atav bika yimosek sham. So he learns that what Rav was talking about is not if the property had been gated already for a winter. Rather, the question is, when was there a Suffolk Tumah? When did it occur that now that something happened in the field and we are afraid of a Suffolk Tumah there? That's the question. When did that occur? So so he says, if the Tumah was never there during Yemosek Shomim, the Suffolk was noiled in the summer, that's when we'll say it could be a Rosh Hashanah. Overall Tumah Yemosek Shomim, but what if the Tumah was still there in the field somewhere, we never cleared the field, and the winter passed, then we treat this field Rosh Hashanah Lakanu Lakan. And then, if that's shot in Rava, then in fact Rava is arguing on what Rabbi Lazar said. Because Rabbi Lazar said you just look at it, either as a cheskes tire, or you look at it when the fellow came. Rava is saying that it depends on how long the Tumah was in the field. Once the Tumah is in the field for a winter, it's considered a Rosh Hashanah. Okay, we'll stop here. We'll be on tomorrow.